Hello everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of Wind Waker Unflooded, the 3D modeling fan art project where we are reimagining the Kingdom of Hyrule as it could have existed within the world and art style of The Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker. Join me today as we work on a new location. It is, y'all, it is always a joy to work on this project and to share it with y'all. And yeah, I mean, look at how far we already are in the project, and just it excites me that just every time I look at these renders of the world at large, and just seeing how much work has been done, right? Because we have to kind of, it's like I'm so in this project, right, mentally, that like it's not that I forget, but it's just like gaining perspective on this. All started with just the islands of the Great Sea from the original game. That's all that existed in the Wind Waker, was just these islands scattered across the Great Sea. And now those islands are now the mountaintops of Hyrule, right? That we always knew they were. And just being able to just expand and extrude from those islands to create this whole world, it's something that I've always wanted to see, right? And even though Hyrule's existed in other games, being able to see it in the Wind Waker's unique art style and being able to see just more of this world is deeply satisfying to me. And I hope it is to y'all as well, and being able to add locations from other games, but also create all new locations. So this video is all about bringing to life a new town, and it's not specifically trying to be another town from another game in Hyrule. This is just something that I think the map is, I want to point to. Hyrule it's civilized, right? And there's farming communities scattered throughout the land, right? That are living off the land, living off of Hyrule. And right, it may not be Kakariko or Lon Lon Ranch or a second Kakariko village or a third Kakariko village, because I think there are multiple versions of that village that might even exist all at once, right? Like, that's just how it works. It's not Hateno Village. This is a brand new location, right? And I've done a couple of locations like that, and there's a couple that have even like, you know, there's a couple that have been like intentionally new locations that I've then retroactively said, oh no, this still fits in line with another location from the series. So I'm going to say that you can say that it's that location, even if that wasn't my intent necessarily, right? And I do think it's worth voicing my creative intent. I think that's something good that I can do through the voiceover for these modeling time-lapse videos, is that it gives you an understanding of what my creative intent was for different things, right? But I also know that there's some of you that are like, you know, I just want to see where the progress is, right? And I think the work can also speak on its own, and it's up to you to decide what it all means. And that's why I've ranted about it before, and I'm not going to repeat myself, but just that's why it's so important to me to think about the storytelling through the environment, and to create a world that speaks for itself on its own, that even if you don't know my creative intent, that you look at this version of Hyrule, and if you have an understanding of how the islands look in the original Wind Waker map, and you can compare it to other versions of Hyrule, and it tells you things, right? And you look at the world, and you have an understanding of, right? I don't know. I could keep yapping about it, but just like I think there are things that I want to speak for themselves. And that's why it's just like, I don't know, there's so many things that I want to add to the map that, yeah, may not exist in other versions of Hyrule, and things that I think make sense. And we've talked about it before. That's why there's a train system, right? Even though Hyrule proper has never had a train. But it makes sense in this version of Hyrule. This is Hyrule right before its fall, right? And it is this version of Hyrule that is lost forever and is remembered fondly, that the King of Hyrule holds on to the past, and Ganondorf holds on to the past. And there's these legends and memories of Hyrule that have drifted, you know, across the winds of the Great Sea. And it's this glorious kingdom. And I think just emphasizing its glory, and so that there's a tragedy to the fall. And there's so much that I want to show through that, right? I want it to be built up. I want it to be expanded, right? And that also points to how I feel about colonialism, right? And there's so much that it, you know, from my own philosophy and what I think of the quote-unquote great empires that are about to fall, right, in our real world. And I guess that's the thing, too, is just like Wind Waker Unflooded is a fan project about a fantasy world, but the way that I approach the modeling of the environment, the way that I approach all of the storytelling that goes into creating the world, right, that comes from a real world perspective. And that's what art is about, in my opinion. And I guess just like, I don't know, I think I feel so aware that like I have a platform. What do I teach y'all? And I talk about that in different videos. And I do think media literacy is something that's important to me, and to recognize that art is not just beautiful. And I think about beauty a lot because the original Wind Waker art style to me is aesthetically beautiful, right? And it's something that resonates with me more so maybe than any other Zelda art style. And like that's why it's aesthetically satisfying to me, inherently beautiful, to be able to see the world of Hyrule in the art style of the Wind Waker, using its textures, its conventions of 3D modeling, right? To me, that's innately satisfying. But art is so much more than aesthetics, and really what made me connect with the Wind Waker. Like, aesthetics are only a small part of it, right? What really made me connect with Wind Waker was what it had to say. Even as a kid, and I didn't understand everything, right? But philosophically, I think there's something that spoke to me, right? And always has. And I think the first thing that as a kid playing the Wind Waker was its gameplay philosophy. That's what spoke to me. The idea that, like, well, you could explore, and that you were rewarded for exploring, and you could interact with these NPCs, and it was really exciting, even as a kid, right, to explore the ocean and find secrets, of course. And that's what really spoke to me, was that, like, it was up to me to find things on my own, and you could find some bizarre things, right, that maybe you wouldn't even really understand until you played the main quest and put it all together, and you go, oh, you know, and, like, it's just, like, these mysteries and riddles, and that's what really excited me, I think, as a kid. And just as I've grown up with Wind Waker and have replayed it, I think of the story and the final boss and everything that it says about letting go of the past and tradition, and that speaks to me, right? That really speaks to me, and resonates with me, because I think that so many modern issues with our world do come from maybe a false interpretations of traditions and people that get lost in trying to preserve those. And I think we do have issues with that, and traditions can be powerful. I think of religion as a tradition that I hold on to, but I have an awareness that I want to be honest with how I interpret my scriptures, right? And that, like, just as an example, like, that's something that is personal and important to me. And I think of the Wind Waker as an example of a story that has something to say about, do you hold on to the past? Do you move forward? And I think just what we see on Outset Island is such an interesting kind of oxymoron in a way, right? This Hyrule has been destroyed, and yet they hold on to the story of the Hero of Time to the point that young men will dress like the Hero of Time and wear that green tunic, right? From the hero chosen by the gods, right? The hero of legend. They'll don that tunic as a way of honoring this hero of old from a world that no longer exists, right? And I don't know. I think that's powerful. And remembering courage from that time, right? And I think that that's what's important kind of about, like, when you hold on to traditions, when you hold on to the past, you don't need this longing for this world that's lost, because you'll never make that come back in all of its glory and riches and splendor, right? That's gone. You know, it's not the time, it's not the long lost time that you should hope to preserve, but it is the admiration for someone's courage from the time long past. That's something you should preserve. I don't know, I'm just rambling, I'm philosophical here, but just, I don't know, just these are all things that I think about, and just something to consider. But I guess all this to say is just art means something. And, like, I know I read a lot into the Wind Waker, and I've spent a lot of time analyzing its story and its maps and thinking about all the things that it implies. And what grounds me is that, like, there's a lot of things that I don't think the developers thought about. There's a lot of islands on the Great Sea that I don't think they thought about what was underneath them. But then there's other islands that, like, I can see so much that it is like an iceberg in a way, or like an island that's just the top tip of a mountain, right? Or what exists in the game is only so much, but what is implied is so much more. And I think a lot of Zelda games have that strength. And I remember I still feel that way about Twilight Princess and Ocarina of Time and Skyward Sword and, right, even Breath of the Wild, that, like, what is shown is only so much, but what is implied creates a world that is so much bigger. And I felt that way about the Wind Waker. And I guess just like there is a place where sometimes you can have a conversation about like, are we overanalyzing this? Because I know a lot of Zelda fans and theorists, like, we really think deeply about so many questions to the point that it's like, well, did the developers even care about these issues? But I do know that they were artists that had something to say, right? Whether that's the environmental artists or the story writers, like, right? These were people that made this game, the Wind Waker, with something to say, right, about humanity, right? And it was even like a response to their own experience of making Ocarina of Time, I think. I think they felt like they were in the shadow of Ocarina of Time. So there's this old kingdom that they have moved beyond, and can they make something new that also honors the old kingdom, right? And that's, I think, kind of how the Great Sea works, right? It's still Hyrule, but shown from a new perspective. And so it's still Zelda, but it's different now. And I think that the Zelda series as a whole, at its best, keeps that philosophy. And that's why I really do hope we can move beyond Hyrule, because I want that balance of newness and old. And I think Zelda at its best keeps that balance well, but historically I think it is a challenge. And I think Wind Waker has a really good balance with that challenge, but not every game strikes the right balance of newness and, right, doing something new, being unique, finding novelty while honoring tradition and honoring what's made the series great in the past. And yeah, I think there's so many pieces of art that are commentaries on society, on history, on the world, but are also commentaries on themselves, are autobiographical and point to what the artists themselves are feeling. And I think it's really cool that the Wind Waker is also an example of that. It is definitely autobiographical in a sense. And I think that shows. But I don't know, yeah, just like art means something. And so I don't know, I think that that's definitely, if there's something I can impart to y'all, it is like to analyze, and y'all can be aware if you're overanalyzing something, but but yeah, just to be aware that like artists have something to say, and that through this fan project, I feel like I've had a lot to say, and that's why I'm really excited to keep working on it, and y'all that have been following the project know I'm working on this. But after the map's done, what I want to produce are like game cutscene style, like animated 3D short films in the style of video game cutscenes, and the style of the Wind Waker's cutscenes, but create these short films that take place in the world that will showcase the story of Ganondorf returning, that showcases the story of Hyrule right before the Great Flood. How did things get so bad that a flood became inevitable, right? That the world was washed away. And what was the lead up to that, right? And we'll see this war in the great lead up to the end of the world, so to speak, right? So, and I'm very excited to tell that story, and there's a lot of things I've been thinking about. I've already been writing the scripts. I'm a good ways through the scripts. I'm almost halfway through all the stories I want to write, so I'm very excited about that, just to be moving on and moving forward. But yeah, I've thought a lot about like what resonates with me, what do I think the original writers were trying to say, and so that's just something that's been on my mind. But there's so many things just within my own life that even after the Wind Waker came out, things that have happened in my life and historically into the world, things that I think, well, maybe I'm not going to be like directly commenting on those because it's a fan project through a fantasy world, but I think you can see that there are things that matter to me, and I mean, I think that will all be clear. I don't want to be too vague or cryptic about it, but I just know that as an American, right, living post 9/11, there's things that like I know that's changed the way that I grew up, for instance, and so definitely like my writing, I think all of that shows, but definitely yeah, like my critique of imperialism, of colonialism, and the monarchy, right, a criticism of Hyrule's monarchy, and even Ganondorf's monarchy as the king of the Gerudo, all of that is also stemming from a critique of American imperialism, right, as well. That's also baked into it, even though I think Hyrule is definitely intentionally, most modeled first after British imperialism, and if it's a critique of the monarchy, it's a critique of the British monarchy. I think that's the first kind of line of allegory, and obviously, like, I think that is, further alluded to, right, by when we get voice acting, right, in Breath of the Wild, right, Zelda is played, right, with a British accent, for instance. But I digress. I want to talk a little bit more about this village, because I think that this was a really fun village to make and to model, and I want to talk more about the actual work that I'm doing in the video, because I'm really excited just to incorporate a new village. There's some huts, using some of the textures from Outside Island and putting those together was definitely interesting to work with those textures in a new way. I'm also using assets from things that either already existed in the map or have already been made and by myself and contributors, and pulling that in. So that it's definitely like, and I think that's okay. Like, I don't think that's breaking the rules, right? For instance, I made this giant statue of the king atop a tower overlooking the city, right? And I want to put this city kind of on a mountain, kind of overlooking Hyrule in a sense, right? We're not the top of a mountain, but you know, above a cliffside. But for the tower, right, I'm using kind of like the lighthouse tower from Windfall Island as the basis for that tower, and then I put the statue on top of that. So it's like that becomes the basis for that. I'm using some buildings that were created for Hateno Village originally by a contributor, but then I've kind of like, you know, altered them slightly and reappropriated them and rearranged them to be extra buildings for this village. I used a sawmill building I created for Hyrule Castletown, and I think that that's okay to kind of like take bits and pieces of things that have been made, and they can kind of, you know, be scattered throughout the world. And part of that is also just an awareness that, like, you know, we're a small team making this map, and in order to make the world as big as possible, it takes a little bit of that kind of creativity of rearranging what's already there as well. And I mean, that's how I view textures, right? There are some, you know, there's a good bit of custom texture work done for Wind Waker Unflooded, but also, as much as I can, I want to pull from the original textures from the Wind Waker itself, from the original game, and to mainly use those. And there's a lot of those to pull from, but that also means that, yeah, like, I'm using a lot of the same conventions throughout the entire world. And I think we've done a lot of really good tricks in order to still make the world feel big and diverse. I know one of those is like for vegetation, for trees. I've set it up so that like different types of trees grow in different parts of the world, right? Whether that's the desert or the deep forests or the Faron region or central Hyrule or the northern part of Hyrule. Like all of these might use slightly different sets of vegetation, right? Even the Great Fish Mountain now like has its own kind of vegetation style, I think, right? So just all of these things are I think important for creating diversity throughout the map. But the map's also big enough that like there is a little bit of how would I put it? Not sameness, but that is something I'm aware of. But I think there's several things that are, you know, allowing us to do a good job of making the world feel new and different, and creating, I think, new landmarks helps with that. And I think having this little village with this giant statue of the king, like, I think that'll be a nice recognizable kind of landmark that will be powerful. The name that I'm thinking for this village, that I've kind of been sitting on, it's an original village, and comment down below if there's another village from the Zelda series that you think it might line up with. Geographically, I want to put it kind of just south of where Lon Lon Ranch is on the map, which, if you don't know, is in Hyrule Field along the river. And so I want it to be kind of south of that, near where like the Stonewatcher Island is, give or take. But yeah, the name I've been thinking, I think, is Leamere, kind of like combining like the grass and awareness of like the lakes in the village as well. And so pulling, you know, a geographical name like that, I think would be a good fit. But yeah, I'm just excited to keep making new stuff and to keep just, it's always fun just to think about like, well, this is, now it's like just more and more I get to think, what do I want to add to the map, right? Because there's so many like iconic Hyrule locations that already exist in Wind Waker Unflooded. There's so many things that, like, if you name just a location from Zelda that matters to you, that you think makes sense on the map, chances are it's already in it or is a work in progress. And so we're at the point in the project where we're filling in the gaps, and, you know, I want to still fill in the gaps with some interesting stuff, and have it be an opportunity to create new things. And I think that that's definitely led to some really interesting stuff so far. And I'm just, you know, I like the idea of creating a whole new village as well. I am like lightly modeling the layout of the village after a real world location, and you might have seen a map kind of underneath the basis for the model that I've been following and pulling from. And so if you've taken notice of that, I won't say what that real world location is, but if you can figure it out, you'll get brownie points. But no, yeah, just thank you all so much for watching, and I'm always excited and inspired by the progress that we're making on this project, and it's been a joy just to share it with you, with the audience, and I want to know what y'all's ideas are. I want to know what y'all think I should work on next. So comment down below your ideas, feedback, just things that y'all want to see incorporated into the project, both big and small. Because we're at that point where, like, I've almost finished a lot of the macro work, and it'll be time for a lot of details. And that's definitely kind of starting to become the next phase of the project for sure. So comment down below your ideas, whatever they are, and I'd love to incorporate them into the project. Your comments definitely affect what I work on next. So without further ado, I'll stop rambling. And so for now, I think I will let y'all go.
Now, if you're looking for other ways to support me, as always, you can support me as a creator by becoming a member on Patreon. There you'll get access to all kinds of exclusive behind-the-scenes content like in-progress outlines, scripts, storyboards, rough cuts, and even soundtracks for my newest films. By becoming a member, you'll also be thanked in the credits for any film I finish during your membership. You can also support me by streaming my music. I compose all of the scores for my own short films, and you can listen to those soundtracks on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you listen to music. Just look up Joe Kendrick. That's JoeKendrick. Y'all have a wonderful day, and without further ado, I'll let you go.